friends, welcome back to my channel. So I think it's shocking that it's September already because I feel like it's still March. But actually it's September and I've passed basically 6 months in quarantine, or in Hong Kong we don't really have a lockdown, but I've stayed mostly at home for the last 6 months. And I know everyone talks about getting a new hobby during lockdown, and I didn't get any new hobbies, but I kind of jumped back into my old hobby, which is reading. It was just so nice to be able to go into another world even while I'm at home, and I ended up buying so many books. Like, here's just a little stack, and I also got a Kindle, so I have so many books to read, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, basically today's video is going to be about 10 of the best books I read during quarantine. And I don't know if you guys watch Vlogbrothers videos, but I want to do it in their kind of style, so it's like quick fire. I'm gonna just list out all of my books in a few words on why I like them. And I'm also gonna do it by genre, so I'm gonna talk about classics first, and then fiction, and then non-fiction. Okay, so starting from classics, this summer I started reading Russian literature, which is something I've basically never touched before, and I love it so much. So the first two books on my list are Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky and Notes from Underground, also by Dostoevsky. I think before reading Dostoevsky, I felt like people didn't understand the way I thought sometimes, but after reading them, I realized, oh, he does understand, and I do think almost exactly like the crazy characters that are in his book. His characters in both of these books are very idealistic, unrealistic about the world. They're very dramatic, and I feel like that I embody a lot of that, even though I try to keep calm on a day-to-day basis. Internally, I'm like going crazy, and I just feel like his characters sometimes. His books are also very philosophical and kind of psychological, so I really recommend it for people who want to have a think about some philosophical issues while they're reading, aside from having a really good story. And I love it so much that I got my brother's Karamazov, and I'm so excited to read this one as well. Okay, so the next book is Mary by Vladimir Nabokov, and this is also one of the few Russian books I've read because I read Lolita first, which is a classic, and I loved the writing in that so much, so I just thought I'd read other Nabokov stuff, and Mary is the one I read this year. So like all of Nabokov's work, it has a very engaging protagonist slash narrator. Well, protagonist. It also has beautiful language. And all the other Nabokov books I've read have obviously been very creepy, like Lolita and Despair, and they talk about like crime and just crazy things. But Mary was very simple, and it was about nostalgia. And I guess the reason I liked it is really based on the place I am right now, where I just left a country that I love, and I'm just in this in-between stage where I really miss a lot of things from my past. And just the whole feeling of nostalgia was put so perfectly in his prose, and I just love the book so much. And yeah, basically my Nabokov obsession got me to get a few more of his books, so I'm looking forward to reading these as well. Okay, number 4 is Jane Austen, and this year I read Mansfield Park, which I really liked. So a little backstory to this is that I've read Pride and Prejudice twice already. The first time I didn't really like it, and the second time I still didn't really like it, and I was so upset with myself because like it's Pride and Prejudice. I'm supposed to love it because it's basically the one classic book that everybody loves, but I just didn't feel like it. And so going into Mansfield Park, I was a little bit hesitant because I feel like I didn't even like the best Jane Austen, but I actually really loved this one. Compared to the other books, I think it's less of a romance and more of like just pure social comedy, social commentary, and it basically talks about a group of people who are in this house, Mansfield Park, and kind of how they interact with each other, get jealous of each other, and just how their story goes. I think the main reason I liked it is just that it was so smart. Like, it basically felt like I was watching a play, watching all these characters go in and out and say a few things each time, and even though it was so many people all at once, I could understand each person's personality and how they interacted with each other, and it just was so witty and satirical about that kind of social life, I guess. It was just really smart. So yeah, this made me really appreciate Jane Austen, and hopefully I'll go back to Pride and Prejudice later on and really enjoy it, but Mansfield Park was really good. Okay, now it's modern fiction, and I didn't read a lot this year, but there are two that really stood out to me. First is The Martian, and this is a really interesting book to read while you're in quarantine and isolated from the rest of the world, because this guy was isolated from the rest of the entire earth. I guess what I really liked about this was that the writing was so witty and just funny. It was just pure funny the whole way, because it's basically the guy stranded on Mars talking to himself. And aside from being really funny, I also loved that The Martian was so scientific, because the author really does try to explain every sciencey thing he does, all the math, And even though it's not real, I just felt like it was very real just because he did all the math in front of me, and it felt really realistic, which is really fun for a science fiction. And the other fiction book that I liked this year is Will Grayson by John Green and David Levithan. So the John Green part of the book was very John Green, very classic, some nice quotes, and this like really sappy teenage boy. So that part was good, but I feel like I've already read every single other book of his, so maybe that part was a little bit repetitive. But the other half of the book, which was written by David, was so freaking funny. Like, I don't think I've ever laughed so much as well, and it just took me back in time to when you're like, you know, like 15 or 16 years old, and everything is horrible, you're depressed, or you feel like you're depressed, and it seems like everything in the world is going against you, and still you happen to find those one or two exhilarating moments in your life that just have so much joy, and your whole teenage life is just this dichotomy of joy and this general like monotonous depression. And I don't know, I just felt like that was so relatable. Okay, so for non-fiction, I have 4 books and they're all different genres. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is Between the World and Me, which is a kind of autobiographical memoir. So this book is kind of written as a letter from a father to a son who is growing up as a black person in America. And I read this kind of around or before the Black Lives Matter protests in, I think, June in America. For me, as someone who didn't grow up in the West or in a society where I was the minority, it was just incredible to read about how distressing it is just to be in that skin color in that country at that time, because everything in the world was just going against you at that time. Aside from being really brutally honest, the thing I love most about this book is the writing. Like, the prose is beautiful. Okay, second nonfiction is a business book, and it's called The Big Short. So this is a book about the 2008 financial crisis, and the author basically uses really witty, sarcastic language to explain the origins of the whole subprime mortgage crisis and all the people who had bet for or against this industry and how they either made a lot of money or lost a lot of money. I've been loving business books this summer for some reason. Well, I'm trying to prepare for my career, but I'm also just loving reading them. And this was by far the best one I've read because you felt like you weren't reading nonfiction. It felt like fiction in that the story was so riveting. And a plus is that he writes about financial concepts so clearly, so by the end you really do think you understand about the whole origin of the financial crisis, what are CDOs, CDSs, and all of that stuff. So I think it was a really good introduction for me to the financial world since I didn't really know anything about it, and it's just a really enjoyable book. Okay, next nonfiction book is poetry, and this year I read Poems of the Great War. And I actually got this book while I was in London, and it's this little tiny little thing, and it was just beautiful. I think you really do have to be in the right mode to read poetry, and I think being stuck indoors, having just left London and feeling a little bit miserable was a good mood for me to read this kind of depressing poetry. And they just have, I think, like almost 100 different poems by so many different poets, and they were all really heartbreaking. So I just really recommend it for some good poetry. And my final nonfiction book is a Christian book called Knowing God. This was written by J.I. Packer, who passed away I think just this year, and it was written in the 70s, so it's a bit old. But honestly, I've never read a Christian book that's so all-encompassing. So this was a really good book about examining the main attributes of God, or our relation to God, like being sons or being the bride of God and stuff. And so this was really good at analyzing those concepts and kind of weeding out some incorrect perceptions of the concepts. And just in general, the tone of J.I. Packer is just so loving, and you really, when you read it, you feel like he loves God so much, and he just really wants you to know God as well, and not know him in a kind of warped way, but know the truth of who he is. And so you can like be in a relationship with him and not be blinded by these wrong perceptions or expectations of him. And so in the tone you can just really tell that he cares, which makes the whole reading experience so enjoyable. And yeah, so that's the end of this video. I tried to talk quickly, but I'm pretty sure it's a long video anyway. I hope you guys enjoy it, and please tell me if you'd like more of these videos, because from my experience, whenever I make videos about books, nobody watches them. Maybe no one will watch this, but I just really love reading, so I just wanted to put this video out there. Let me know what videos you'd like to see next, and I'll see you guys very soon. Bye!